A quick message from our interview sponsors. Greenlane Digital, Australian internet and technology investors. Looking for great entrepreneurs to work with? Go to greenlanedigital.com.au. Hi, I'm Gareth Rose from iPitch.com.au. This is the second part of the interview I did with Matt Cameron, the CEO of Corporate Catapult. In this part of the interview, we discussed Corporate Catapult and how he's setting that up in the US. We also discussed his former role as the Australian and New Zealand sales director at Salesforce.com. In this part of the interview, we discussed business-to-business selling, recruiting and motivating sales staff, segmenting customer groups, and much more. Here's the interview. Let's shift over to Corporate Catapult. So, initially, I don't know how much you can talk about because you're still sort of in startup phase, but can you sort of just explain, I guess, what it's about in short and and what stage you're at now?
Sure. So I'll start by telling where we began and then where we're at now, just as a guide for people. If anyone's interested in or focused on the lean development movement, or customer development from Steve Blake, we really tried to follow that, and we'd never done it before. So we read the books and met Eric Rees when he was here a couple of years ago. We really believe in that. So we started with the idea that Corporate Catapult was a career acceleration tool for people working at large enterprise. And the idea is that we were going to create a platform for people to engage with that gave them all the HR best practices they need to get ahead at a large company. Bunch of things. How to prepare for the next promotion, how to build relationships with influential people, how to get a good performance review, yada, yada, yada. So what we did is we spent our first 9 months doing all the customer development stuff, the mock-ups, the feedback, the iterations, all that good stuff. And then we released what was a very, very thin and wide product, which is the entire suite with minimal functionality, and then pushed that out to our alpha group users. And the feedback we got was, 80% of the stuff looked really good on mock-up, but we just wouldn't use it day to day. And so my learning that I'd like to share with people is that you need an interactive mock-up of what you're doing. And you can do it with PowerPoint. I could do it, and I'm not technical. So you've got your nice mock-ups of the screenshots, and maybe you've done it, you've had a designer do the final look and feel, the initial look and feel, but in high fidelity.
Yeah.
That's great. And people can click on it and jump from page to page. Then they'll really get a feel for what it's like before you've even written a line of code. Sounds obvious when you say it afterwards, but in the heat of the moment, you build it, they give you feedback, that looks fantastic, we want that, you go build it. So we did that, and we found out that 20% of what we build is fantastic. People love it, and they want us to build it out, but the rest we didn't need to build. So trying to avoid doing that. Where we're at now is we've completed that, and we're just about to release a closed beta of what we're doing. And I don't know if you'd call it a pivot or not, but our focus now is still on the same people working at large enterprises that want to get ahead. The two pieces of functionality they really love are related to influence mapping in their company, so who's who in the zoo, formal authority, and those connected to those people that influence them. And not by how many emails they send, but by observation. You and I play tennis together once a week, we're friends, I influence your thinking because we're mates. And that's how corporate politics works. And we've also built some relationship development functionality, which I won't share just yet, that's about helping people touch base regularly in a meaningful way. I talked before about mutual value in a relationship. And if you're going to do corporate brown nosing and relationship building, you need to offer someone value and help them with their personal objectives. And so we've built a tool to help people do that. So it's very narrow now, it's very focused. End of this month we'll have it out to our closed beta group, and then we hope in April to get the data we need to take back to the venture capitalists we're working with to secure our first round of external funding, because to this point my co-founder and I have jointly funded the business for the first year.
So do you expect to raise capital though before you go public beta?
It'll be about the same time.
Okay.
Yeah, we don't actually need the capital to do that. What we need the capital for is to accelerate our development toward scale. So we can do it ourselves first. What I would say to people is, if you can squirrel away enough chestnuts that you can kind of self-fund the seed stage of your business, then you're going to retain a lot more equity because you're going to make all the mistakes, well, not all of them, but the majority of the mistakes happen in the first, X many months of your business. Nice to do that on your own dime because then that risk is taken away from VCs or your first round of angels. They know you've made the learning and then they're taking on less risk.
That makes sense for sure. In terms of marketing strategy, I'm not sure if you can talk about this, but how do you intend to actually acquire users or customers? I think you said they're not. How do you intend to acquire users or customers?
Yeah, so we're basically, without giving the exact specifics away, we're going direct to individuals in large enterprise. So, but let's assume somehow that we've got 20 people that have been exposed to Corporate Catapult that work at IBM Australia. The software itself inherently is viral. Because I'm trying to create an influence map of IBM Australia. I work here, I want to know who's who in the zoo. It makes sense for me to pass this on to my peers and friends within the company and say, hey, have you seen this? Because when they put their opinion of people, their knowledge of the system, of the company and the system, then all of us get a richer map of IBM.
Yeah, okay.
So it's sort of a community-based thing. So our hope and expectation is that viral mechanic will drive people, because it's not just a game mechanic, it has real value to me. If you're putting your data in, I'm putting it in, and we're all sharing it.
Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Other than the building, I guess, the thin layer of a whole lot of functionality and not validating enough, I guess, in that first mock-up phase, what other, or are there any other mistakes that you've made so far?
I think I haven't got it all right. I'm sure, but perhaps I haven't seen the aftermath of that yet. So far, I feel like we've done a reasonable job. I think certainly structurally we've done the right thing. I think the relationships developed in the States are great. I don't think I have any other learnings to share right now, other than being very, very focused on what you release first. The old saying, be embarrassed about what you release, otherwise you've waited too long, is true. And you don't need to release the full product, just release modules, parts of it, anything, because you're going to get data points as you go. And that's our biggest learning.
Okay, great. Well, look, I'm looking forward to coming back and hearing a whole lot more about that in, I don't know, a few months, 6 months, whatever the case is, and getting an update. Okay, so let's backtrack a little bit. So before you got involved in Corporate Catapult and moved over to the US and everything else we spoke about, one of your roles was one of the roles back then was the Australian and New Zealand sales director at Salesforce.com.
Yes.
So I guess I want to hear more about that. I've got a background in B2B sales as well, and I'm particularly interested, but I also know that a lot of the startups who are selling B2B could get a whole lot of valuable advice from you. So my question to you is, back then when you worked there, how did those guys acquire customers? Was it a mix of direct sale as well as self-sign-up, or how did that work?
Okay, so context. So I joined them 6 years ago. I was with them 5 years, and when I joined them, I was employee 6 for Asia. So it really was startup here. And many of your listeners or viewers will know that there's Salesforce Australia, which is a call center company that got acquired by Salmap. So back in the day, I had the problem where when you rang up and said you're from Salesforce, they thought you're from a call center company. So it was quite challenging. So just like any other startup, we had no credibility and no brand. So probably instructive in terms of how they did it. Right at the start, we did have a self-sign-up, self-activation, pay with a credit card type thing. In the early days, I guess that's where we got some traction. What I would say that we did well at that time was, if somebody did sign up and activate themselves, we were emailing them straight away saying, hi, how can I help? Tell me a little bit more about your business. And of course, we'd go to their website and figure out what we could from that and have a meaningful conversation straight away. And the reason we did that was because we wanted to create delighted customers that we could reference later. I think one of the things that Salesforce did best was the concept of customer success. And I think that every B2B salesperson should be thinking about that. Every founder should be talking to their team about how we delight customers. because you're going to make a lot of mistakes along the way. You're going to have bugs, you're going to have outages, this stuff's going to go wrong. So you need to create that goodwill where your customers genuinely feel, and it must be sincere, that you care about their outcome. I'm not here just to sell you software, it's about mutual success. And Salesforce was very, very good at that. So how we did it and how people might want to think about it is that we had a very, very low friction sign-up process. Every B2B site where it can should have especially for SaaS, a self-service sign-up process. For Salesforce, they gave a 30-day trial as well, and I think that was gold because that provided all our lead flow. Some of our leads on the 30-day trial were people at Macquarie Bank, Vodafone, Hutchison 3. So they were very large companies, and it was just somebody who thought they might need something small. And for us, the beachhead strategy was really the way we were successful. And I think for smaller businesses, this is a really good way to go. So you find a small group that will become evangelists in a large company. Just worry about selling to them. Make them hyper successful so that they'll become your advocate within the company. They'll help you do what we were talking about before, which is map out the company, who's who in the zoo, and help you with your next sale, essentially. So, so what we did was that we spent a bit of money on SEO back in the day when that was useful, and made sure that we were discoverable so that if you typed in CRM, you could find us. We made it easy for you to try us with a 30-day sign-up.
So just to clarify that, was that 30 days they sign up without any, without putting any credit card details? Nothing.
Yep, 30-day free trial.
And it was always software as a service?
Always.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah,
okay.
Never any software. The old no software logo has been there from the start. And so you do that, and that's your lead flow. And that really was the key to our success. I mean, I can just simplify it down to that was, back in the day, give them a free trial. And then you can start the phone selling process. Now, there's a lot of secret sauce to the way Salesforce does phone selling. I could talk for hours on just that topic probably. But the key is immediate feedback. So I sign up for a trial, and an email comes back within minutes with Salesforce's objective. Thanks for, obviously the automated email, but then you get one from someone who's, hey, I see you're from Caterpillar Equipment. We've got 5 other customers like you that do this and have had these benefits. Let me know if there's anything I can do to help you with your trial. And then follow up in 2 weeks. How's the trial going? And at Salesforce, because it's software as a service, we can see what you've done, not your data, but we can see that you've logged in every day this week, that you put in 500 contacts and yada, yada, yada. And if people weren't getting inertia, or gaining momentum, I should say, we would be on top of them, helping them. How can I having trouble getting your contacts in, yada, yada, yada. So, be it software as a service or installed software, I think the first 90 days of momentum is so critical because that's when they're emotionally invested. They've seen the website, they're a little bit excited, they've obviously got a problem they need to solve, that's why they've started the trial or made the investigation. You need to be on that and capture that emotion and use it to move forward. I think the second part of that is that when they do commit to you, is the bit I said about customer success, you need to have someone who's actually incented for them to be successful. So at Salesforce, they had a customer success manager, which is a funny title, but they were incented on customer satisfaction and renewal rates. Okay. So at the end of the year, I renewed my subscription, and they had targets, and they were very, very high targets in terms of percentage renewal. So then all the way through the year, they're managing those relationships, and they're essentially coaches in the use of our application. So for people out there who have got B2B applications, don't teach people how to use your software. Teach people how to use your software in their business to make them successful, right? So we wouldn't say, here's how you import context, but that's the trivial stuff you do at the start. What we said was, what are you trying to do this year? We're trying to break into this market. How are we going to do that? We think we're going to run events. Oh, right, okay. If you're going to run events, here's a best practice for managing an event. Oh, and by the way, here's how the tool automates that process.
Okay, so it's almost sales training that you're giving them mixed with how it links in with the CRM.
100%. So if you've got a business application rather than a technology tool, it's a business application. You need to have someone in your team, I think, that is an expert in that process. So at Salesforce.com, we only employed the best salespeople because we were selling to sales directors, marketing directors, those sorts of things in the early days. Therefore, we had a bit of credibility. If we weren't executing a best practice sales process ourselves, how the heck could we sell someone at all?
Yeah.
And then they would trust you because you coached them in the process, not the technology. And so, this is not going to be applicable to all your viewers, but I think that if it's a business application, you have to have that person.
So, can you just sort of explain that a little bit further?
Sure.
Let's just use another example of, it doesn't have to be specific, but something that isn't training them in sales,
yep.
For a sales system. Say it's another type of B2B software
yep.
that does something else though. Are you saying that you have someone who's really good at that process of what it does?
Yeah.
Just an example, buzz numbers. I don't know how familiar. I did this interview with Nick last week. It's all about basically getting all the inputs from all like blogs, Twitter, all the different social media and such all around the internet, and basically putting that into a usable form that a company can use and basically get a perspective of what's happening about the company.
Yep.
So if you imagine there's an expert in, I gather what you're saying is there'd be an expert in that area, and they understand how it all works and what you're supposed to do if someone on Facebook or someone on Twitter does some sort of tweet about something, and they sort of train them in what you actually do once you've got the system in place.
Exactly. So in that specific example, you have someone who's a brand marketing expert, social media expert, who doesn't just say, oh yes, and if someone complains about the bad service they've got about their mortgage application, the best practice response to that is to immediately reach out to them via the same channel and engage in this way. And when you've done that and they're happy, the follow-up then is, hey, if you're happy with what we've just done, would you mind retweeting, just tweeting out now to say, oh, thanks very much, problem solved, what great guys the CBA are because they fixed my problem.
Yeah.
If that process has very little to do with the technology, it's how you're using the technology. Yes, you need that expert.
Okay, great. That makes a lot of sense. Other than, we talked about the 30-day trial and I guess inbound leads. Were you doing much outbound cold calling or outbound sales activity?
In the early days, no. In the small medium business space, we weren't, because we were getting enough inbound leads. Our team was so small; it was more about filtering the leads that were coming in.
Yeah.
As we grew, however, we had to do that, and that when I was there early, that was the toughest time for the outbound stuff, I think, because we had no brand and we were trying to make that leap, back to crossing the chasm. We had to think about which verticals we were going to attack. The credibility center we had was that we had thousands of users now in the SMB space, so we needed to get that first enterprise customer, and that was the job myself and a couple of guys that I was working with that were trying to break into the enterprise space. So then we said, okay, we need to get a bank, a telco, an insurance company. We need to figure out financial services for us or media telco seem to be the right vertical. Which are we going to get? In Australia and New Zealand, it turned out that the first ones that really fell fast were media telco. So our first customers were Vodafone, Hutchison, Telecom New Zealand, PowerTel. So we picked them off one at a time. And so then it was all about outbound calling. But for us, my methodology, and the one that turns out is consistent with corporate, is that you never ever cold call. You research a company to find out what the business drivers are right now. You find the right title of the person there, and you write them a specific targeted email that has the standard format, which is, I'm writing to you because this has happened, something's changed. XYZ's happened with sales in the equity products group of CBA, and I read about it, and it's a problem. We have helped Wells Fargo fix this problem, blah, 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 and they got these results. I'm going to call you on this day to talk about how we can do it. Same structure every time. And our hit rate was exceptionally high because very few people take the time to research specifically what's happening at a company. They think that the spray approach is going to get them the numbers they want. I really disagree with that because every contact you touch with an irrelevant message burns that contact.
Okay, so how then do you get, let's just say you are calling someone quite high up that's got gatekeepers and such.
Yeah.
How do you initially get the email, and then how do you get through to them on that day as well?
So getting the email these days is a lot easier than it used to be because most of the time you can find for like a Commonwealth Bank, for example, you can find the
format of their
format
email,
of email
cool.
in a number of ways.
Okay,
If you can't figure out that, but I actually met a guy the other day who's got a thing called emails for domains, or domainsforemails.com or something like that, and he's trying to crowdsource that globally for every corporation, so you can, and it shows you the name format and everything, which I think is quite an interesting idea. But you'll figure that out. And the big challenge is to find out who is who in the company. But then that's how you use LinkedIn. LinkedIn is one of the best resources for this sort of thing. So you just type in a title and a company, and it will tell you all the people that match that criteria. That's all you need. Now, you don't approach them through LinkedIn, but you get what you need from there to find out who's who. And then I would say the next thing you need to do is obviously research the industry, the company, the individual, and that's an increasing value, right? If I know a lot about you personally, what your specific objectives and drivers are, it's a lot more valuable to write to you about that than it is to say, well, in your industry, in general, I know that XYZ is a trend. That trend is not universally applicable, so you could be completely off base. But most of the letters I've ever received are like that. In your industry, XYZ, well, it's boring, it goes in the bin. But if you say, Matt, I saw you just got the job running equity products, and I know that your targets are to increase by 20%, that's compelling. Really?
Yeah.
You're going to help me get that? So you try to get to that. Most of the time, of course, it's more around CBA said in their annual report A, B, and Z. And so this is what we can help you with. And that's you're going to get that through diligence. Two things I'd say. Have people that can understand financial reports, can explode an annual report and understand what it means, and can collect all the information that's publicly available and distill it down to compelling messages that relate to your company. That's a smart person. That's somebody who's analytical and can interpret these things in a way that's meaningful, and then can articulate it in a way that's succinct. That's a good salesperson. Second thing I would say is use LinkedIn for all it's worth, because where else can you find out that, you know, I had these jobs in the past life, that we know these people in common, and that you went to these colleges, and what your interests are. I mean, it still blows me away that we all put that stuff out publicly, and most of us do. So use that to your advantage.
In terms, just to get really specific here, because you are as well, and this is really good, in terms of the actual email itself, maybe some like subject line, and you said there's a specific format that you would use then. Can you go into a little bit more detail, like how long would it be, or what? I mean, I don't know what you can say, but
I can say I don't know how much time we've got today, but I've actually got a template that I've used for years, and I used to train salespeople in the use of this. But the net of it is that your headline, your subject line, must be an action doing. You know, so it's increasing, saving, whatever. But it's an ing. It's a verb that's going to help them with something specific to them.
Okay.
So that, you know, if it was as the emails come in, I'm deleting, I'm filtering, whatever else. And when I started doing this, of course, it was a printed letter. So when you fold a letter up, all you're seeing is the bold heading for that in the first paragraph. So that was what was key. And I think it still holds true for email. You know, everyone will tell you the subject line must be compelling. Now, the most compelling thing you can put in a subject line, I think from my experience, is using someone's name that knows you, right? So if I'm trying to get to you, but I'm not sure I've got the right message, I might go to someone who works alongside you and talk to them about you first. And you know, I and many of my guys have done that in the past. So you might have relationships with some underlings or peers, and you'll say, hey, look, I want to talk to Gareth about X, Y, and Z. I'm really not sure what's important to him right now. What do you think? I'm going to go blah, blah, blah. Your subject line is, John Smith told me you'd be interested in blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, okay.
Right? That's the subject line.
They're going to open that email.
Social proof. I mean, what's John saying about me?
Yeah.
Right? And then you start with the format I described before.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Cool. Look, we won't go into too much detail on that, but I might well come back to you on this, particularly if our viewers are wholly interested in the topic.
Sure.
In terms of, just for the next couple of minutes really quickly, in terms of actually, if we can relate this to a startup that's hiring sales guys, they're recruiting sales guys, they're trying to motivate their teams, that sort of stuff, what would you suggest from anything from literally it's the first salesperson they bring on, or it's a small team of, I don't know, anywhere between 2 and 5 salespeople or up to 10 salespeople, but more a startup really just trying to bring on good salespeople.
Yeah.
What can you say about recruiting and also about motivating their sales guys?
Okay, so there's a profile I look for in startups, and that is in fact in any sales role really, I want to see people who have, there are three things you need for success. You need a great product that people are going to want to buy. That's not in the salesperson's control. But their decision to join the company is in their control. So if you've got someone who's joined companies with rubbish products in the past, I wouldn't hire them. The second thing is the territory that they have. You've got to have a reasonable patch. You know, if I send you to the desert to sell boats, then again. But that's an indicator to me. If you join a company knowing your territory and it was rubbish, then that's not an excuse. Territories do get chopped and changed after you've been there a year. Not your fault. You can end up with a bad territory. And the third thing is your capability. Right? Everyone focuses on a person's capability, and they think that that's the only reason people fail. But I've got several of examples where I've seen, Class A sales guys fail because the territory was chopped and they were given some rubbish. That's not their fault. It doesn't happen all that often for A players, but it does happen. So anyway, I would look at their background from those perspectives, and you're trying to prove for all of those. But the most important thing I say for startups is don't ever hire a guy or gal that's come from an established company, an Oracle, an SAP, a Microsoft, that's been in that role for 5 or 6 years. And I'm going to look, a lot of people disagreeing with me, but the reason I say that is because they've got corporate infrastructure around them that they're used to. They have someone writing most of their proposals for that. They have templates, they have RFP guides, they have so much infrastructure around them that the chaos of a startup will kill them, right? It's a very special person that has, as I used to say, blood dripping from their teeth, that's hungry enough to get it there and do whatever it takes. Because, I've been in 3 startups with B2B sales before, or smaller companies, and it's all about knowing, well, we don't have a contract for that, or we don't have an agreement for this, or we don't have a presentation for that, and staying up till 2 a.m. doing one and reusing it and sharing it with your buddies and then fixing it on the fly and so forth. So you need somebody who's got that startup experience. Don't take someone, a common mistake people make, especially when they get funding, is they go and get the VP of X from some company and employ them because that sounds good, it looks good, and wow, I got a lot of experience, but they die. Because they're not used to working, A, at the pace you have to work in a startup, and B, rolling the sleeves up and doing all the dirty work you have to do. Your own spell checking and printing and running down to Kinko's or wherever you go to get things printed, they don't have to do that. So employ someone who's scrappy, right, and hungry. Second thing, employ somebody who's made a lot of money, if you can. Every sales guy I've employed, I ask them, what have you earned? And if they won't tell me...
You're doing sales, even.
Yes.
Yeah, cool. Yeah.
Every sales guy. What did you earn in your last job? What's the most you've ever earned, right? And I want to hear them tell me they've earned a fortune, because that tells me they're successful, right? If they won't tell me, I won't automatically rule them out, but it's a data point. And the second thing I would say is, in a B2B environment, if you don't know somebody who knows them and you're employing from within your own city, right, I wouldn't hire them, because you just can't. References are pretty much worthless, right, unless they're third party and objective, i.e. they weren't prepped. So for me, certainly at Salesforce, it was always, can I background you? And I can find that out through the companies you work for, through LinkedIn and whatever else, because it's the stuff that's not on LinkedIn I want to know about. Yeah. So that's probably my hiring in a nutshell. Think about those 3 things, and don't just, if they failed in the past, don't think it's just capability. If they've succeeded in the past, don't think it's capability. If you've got a guy who came out of Salesforce as met his quota 3 years in a row, and it was from 2004 to 2007, that doesn't say anything about them, because the hottest product in the market, big territories, and they employed good guys. You want to know that a good guy has been in a tough territory and still succeeded. So you need success upon success if you can see it.
Cool.
We're running time.
Well, I'm asking you. It's 25 to 11.
Yeah, we're cool. If you want to talk about motivation briefly, all I would say is this: make sure that people are hungry. So give people incentive to make money. They say that salespeople are 2 types: they're either coin operated, which means you've got to pay them money, or the flattery operated, which means you've got to give them kudos and status. And so mix the 2 together. is my opinion. So what I did with my guys at Salesforce is that we had our corporate structure, which I couldn't change in terms of your incentive plan. So you had a reasonable base and a reasonable commission, but it was open. And when you're running a startup, you should recognise the fact that revenue is king, and that if people help you, blow it out through the roof, well ahead of your expectations, then they should get proportionally rewarded. Mistakes people make is they go, I'm not going to let that guy earn that much money, he's not worth that. Who says that? He or she is worth that if they're delivering the cream to you early in your business, the most important time. So Salesforce did it right. They had uncapped commission. You could earn lots and lots of money early on. I think that makes sense. And secondly, make absolute heroes out of your salespeople. If they make a big sale, then they're gods. So the Salesforce culture is a very interesting one. In that respect, startups aren't going to have the club trip to Hawaii, but what you can do is you can have, quarterly recognition ceremonies where, it sounds silly, but you get the little award or something, but even just standing up in front of the group and saying, hey, we want to celebrate what you've done here. Thanks for it. That's really important to a lot of sales guys. Flip side, being CEO of a startup, make sure that people don't get disenfranchised with a sales-centric culture. Because if the only people being applauded early stage are the sales guys, you're going to have issues with engineering who are critical at that stage of development.
Yeah, good, very, very good point. In terms of, just for a couple more minutes, because I'm thinking I'm going to divide this segment up into a separate one. Segmenting customer groups.
Yeah.
You mentioned before that early on with Salesforce, you targeted a vertical. I think you said telcos, and the other, I think maybe the other one's finance. I can't remember what you said, but what can you say about it's a B2B product? It's early on in the startup's life. You think that these might be the sort of customers that would buy it.
Yep.
What can you say about segmenting customer groups and then sort of focusing your efforts on different?
Well, early on you've got a hypothesis about who's going to buy it, right? So you're still trying to get product market fit. And so what I would say is that don't worry too much about the territories or what you're going to go after. What you should think about is what size of company is my hypothesis that is a fit for this.
Yeah.
So in the early days of Salesforce, we went out to very, very small companies. One user licenses up to 20 licenses, because that teaches you a lot. It teaches you, will anyone buy it? And then are there any verticals where this is being drawn up most? So if you find that you're getting, you've got 50 companies now with 20 users or more or less that are really loving it, and it happens to be finance, well, maybe that's the vertical where I want to start pushing up the value chain. So the larger and larger companies within that vertical. Yeah. What I can assure you is a failure formula is to go after large companies across verticals early on, because you've got no credibility. Every large the larger the company, the more risk averse they are. So they don't want to first cab off the rank. And if you can say, look, I've already got 50 companies who are just a bit smaller than you using this, well, it seems a lot less of a risk.
Yeah.
So what people should do is go small and wide and figure out where it is. I mean, they may know that's only applicable to these 3 verticals. Perfect. Start small. Don't burn your opportunities by going too large too early, because you're going to have pilots that muck up, you're going to have failed implementations. Better to do that with small organisations. Okay.
I was going to ask you about working out a sales pitch, but let me run this by you based on what you just said. Say you initially target slightly smaller companies who the take-up's possibly easier because there's less risk and they're more likely to come on board. Through that process there, you just ask basically your customers and talk to them, understand their core needs, and then with that you work out basically what your sales pitch is to the next level that you push up.
Yeah, you're going to start with a hypothesis and you're going to be wrong. And so, it's actually, every professional sales guy calls it the discovery process. Every new sale you go through customer discovery, but in the early days you're actually going through market discovery a bit, so that the next time you go in you can say, look, I know in your industry receivables is an issue. Days outstanding needs to be reduced by 10% or 15% typically, and then you get nodding heads. They understand. So yes, you're learning all the time, and that's why it's really important early on to have smart sales guys that can learn from those processes and feed it back into the system, so that every time you do a pitch, it's getting better and better and better.
Yeah.
Lone wolves are what you're going to want at the start because they're just self-motivated hunters. You need people that are also invested in making this whole thing better so that for themselves and for the people around them, you're doing a better job.
Cool. Let's just finish on one last point about selling and particularly the use of the CRM. What can you say, possibly other than promoting Salesforce, but what can you say about using a CRM and how best to use it for a sales environment? I mean, there's a number of other sort of free ones for startups like Zoho and a few other ones as well. But how would a startup or slightly after that, a business who's got a significant B2B sales presence or sales component, how would they best make use of the CRM? What are some tips you might have?
I think the topic's too big to talk about, but I can say one thing. Having dealt with literally dozens of companies trying to implement a CRM. Now, it doesn't matter whether it's Microsoft, Oracle, that doesn't matter to me. CRM is a set of processes and a cultural thing. It has nothing to do with technology. I mean, customer relationship management, a set of words that describe behaviours, doesn't describe a tool. So what I found in the past, if you've got sales teams that are not meeting their numbers, let's say, for example, their close rates are too low. They're getting lots of opportunity, but they're just not closing them. A smart sales director goes, well, we're going to put a CRM in, and that's going to fix the problem. But no, it's not. All it's doing is, in most cases, they automate the things they're already doing, and then perhaps they do some additional things because the tool allows you to. But most of the time, it's just speeding up the things you're doing wrong already. And secondly, if you're not doing the typical processes of CRM today, sticking a tool in isn't going to force you to do it either. So my advice to people using CRM is figure out or find out what are the best practices in terms of lead generation, opportunity development through to closure. Articulate that in written form, flow chart it. What are the steps to closure? Understand. You're going to learn that from your early customers. You're going to learn that in this environment, you've got to do a face-to-face presentation. It's going to be followed up with another one. Then it's going to be a pilot, and then it's going to be closure. In some organisations, it's going to be a WebEx demo online, and they're going to sign up with a credit card. So you've got to find out what that process is, and then you can map that to a CRM tool, which helps you do it more efficiently. And the thing about CRM, not only does it allow you to be more efficient, but it allows you to be more effective because you can learn. If you put a CRM in correctly and you use the metrics that come out of it, you can see that in this stage of our sales process, which might be from presentation to closure, we're losing 80% of our deals. Well, something's wrong with our presentation. So you've got to take the learning. Otherwise, if you tell a sales guy to put data in and they don't get benefit back, they won't use it.
Yeah.
So another topic, topic for another time. But what I would say is, people should never think that CRM tools are CRM. They're not.
Yeah, good point. Well, look, we've covered a lot. Thank you very much, then.
All right. Cheers, mate.
Cheers. That was the interview. Hope you enjoyed it. If you've got any feedback or recommendations of people who I should be interviewing, please let me know. I do want to hear about it. Get in contact with me via the iPitch website. That's the best way. And otherwise, look out for more interviews at ipitch.com.au. Thank you.